Stepping on Cracks, a fictional story about someone who returned to Guyana, formerly British Guiana, and witnessed the change in culture, politics, race, and how the politics of the 1960s are impacting race relations and politics even today. We'll talk more about Stepping on Cracks with Carmen Subryan coming up next on CaribNation. Hello, welcome to CaribNation. I'm Derrice Deane. My guest today is Dr. Carmen Subryan, a professor of English at Howard University and an author, a prolific author. She has written several books about culture and history in her home of Guyana. She has written today about her return to Guyana and some of the things that she found, and she will tell us more about that. Welcome, Carmen. Thanks for joining me. And this is an interesting story about looking back 50 years and how that relates to what's happening today. Let's start at the beginning. You're from Linden.
Yes. I was born in Linden, grew up in Linden, and I left in 1968. While in Linden, I attended Christiansburg Scott School. Then I got a scholarship to go to Mackenzie High. I don't know if you remember at that time, you had to pay to go to high school. I was lucky to get the only scholarship from my school. So I went to Mackenzie High, graduated at 15. I started teaching at Christiansburg Scots, went back to my school. They didn't let me teach until 16. I wanted to teach at 15, and when I went, the headmaster said,
You're too young.
You're too young. Come back when you're 16. So my birthday was December the 30th, and the January 3rd I started. So I taught for a little while, then I went into Guyana Teachers College for 2 years. I left Guyana Teachers College, went back to Linden, worked out my 2 years, because when you train, you have to give
serve
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Of course, when I was finished with my training, I wanted to run away to America. But they told me, no, you can't. You should have read the information at the beginning. Yeah. So I left in 1968, and I came to Howard. I stayed at Howard until 2015.
Wow. Howard is your home.
Howard is my home.
Yeah.
My daughters used to tell me, we don't want to go to Howard. We've been
heard
going to
enough of
Howard
it."
since preschool. So I said, well, that's good. But if you want to go somewhere else, you have to get your own money, because Howard will take you for free. So one daughter, she took me up on my challenge, and she graduated from Johns Hopkins with honors. The other one, she went to Howard. So, you know, she didn't have a choice, because she was Miss Fashionista, and
so
she did all the...
She was fine at home.
Oh, man, she was at home at Howard. So that, you know, she went to all the theater programs and whatever.
Yeah.
So that was, that's how I started out. But I started writing. I think all my life I've been writing all my life.
Sometime,
Yeah.
yes.
Even in Guyana, I wrote short stories that were published in the Chronicle Annual, and you know, the newspaper, and the Christmas. There was a big Christmas magazine. Yeah, I had some in there also. Poems, short stories. So I've been writing all my life. And somebody told me the other day, you should thank your white teacher at Mackenzie High for that. I said,
to give you the foundation.
Well, you know, you have to be fair.
Yeah.
It is true. At that time, Mackenzie was divided into the two parts, Watuka for the whites, the bauxite area.
The expatriates.
And the Kumaka, well, not Kumaka, they call it a different name. But the Mackenzie proper, that was for the blacks. There was a definite division. And of course, the housing was different. Everything was, you know, I just showed you pictures of Utuka House. The grounds, everything, all fancy, beautiful place. And of course, there was the village, as they called.
Of course, for the relax.
Right. Yeah. There was also a fence, a gate, and a guard. So the people from the people from the village couldn't go up into Utuka, where the white folks from Canada and America lived.
The bauxite people.
Bauxite people, exactly.
Yeah. Linden was the bed of bauxite. Yeah,
oh, yeah, definitely. And if you want to check the history of Linden, I have it in here also in this book, which is really not a novel as such. I'll explain a little later. Yeah. It's a little bit, but most of it, it's non-fictional, most of it. But anyway, that bauxite company was, some people say it was our salvation. I guess it was, because it developed the area.
And provided jobs.
And of course, all of the land that they got for that bauxite company, they practically stole. And my great-grandfather was a white Scottish guy who owned Plantation Nycadact, which he renamed Plantation Retrieve. Oh. And Mackenzie, the guy who came up and so he said discovered bauxite. They knew bauxite was there all along. The Amerindians used to do the bauxite for their homes and all that stuff. They were using it. But anyway, Alicock actually left a will giving all that land to us, our family, the 8 children he had with a colored woman, and one child he had with an, we call him indigenous person, who's an Amerindian woman. And that's how we came down. We actually have that will, which was probated. But then Mackenzie, and this is in 1750s, I'm talking about. My family was there since 1750s. In 1914, that's when Mackenzie went up and practically stole the land from the people. He told them he wanted land to plant oranges. So they gave him the land. And I have some records of that, $2 per acre. Wow. Plantation Retrieve was 4,901 acres. Wow. And he got all that land. And the next thing you know, Bauxite Company started, and they opened in 1916. I was there for the 100th anniversary of the Bauxite Company in 2016. But it's a fascinating story. And my family is entirely caught up in it. So some of what I've written is about that. And in the book, you'll see it's, and I'll say the book, not the novel, because it's like a hybrid.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a hybrid, half and half, a little bit of both.
Yeah, and if you look at the table of contents, you're going to see there's a prologue, of course, then there's Coming Home, where I tell you why I want to go. Yeah. Then I have School Days, Culture Revisited 2, Traditions and Superstitions. I have something about Guyana cuisine. So you see, the book is kind of an eclectic mix. Then I have a photo gallery in the middle of the book, about 50 photographs. And I did that because nowadays, I found that if you want to engage young people, be visual.
You have to be visual,
And I would put this in the hand of a young person, and the first thing they'll do is go to the pictures in the middle. Because they're going to see about Guyana, and I even have pictures of the food and the buildings and whatever, So they find that nice. And then I would encourage them to read the rest of it. And pique their interest. And I even have superstitions. I have the history of Linden, of course, because that's my thing. infrastructure problems, the second part I got serious because those are the issues that we're facing.
Now,
in
those
Guyana,
are some of the
Caribbean.
things that when you got back there, to begin with, did you go with the idea that maybe I can lay a groundwork for moving back? Or am I just going to look and see what there is and then decide?
Well, I really wanted to go back. I was hoping to return. And in the prologue, I actually said that. You know, the last part, I said, let's see, I'll just read the last paragraph. Doreen believed that if life were measured in quarters, she could spend the last quarter in Guyana. After all, she had lived the first formative quarter in that country, that had partly molded her into the woman she had become. But the second and third quarters, almost 50 years, had been spent in the United States, her adopted country. Now she was ready to spend the last quarter in her country of birth. But to do so, she had to discover for herself whether that was possible. Stay positive, her alter ego encouraged. You can go home again. You know, and of course, you know, where that came from.
So what surprised you most?
Well, when I went there, the people welcomed me. Oh, it was, of course, I'd been going periodically.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, you'd been
I'd
there
taken
before.
my kids when they were babies all the way up until the last time I took the two girls, my two girls. One got ill, the young one who's a prima donna. And she
Drama
made an
queen.
announcement in the plane while we were back. You know, she was coming in the plane, she was shivering. I thought she had caught malaria or something.
Yeah.
And she announced to me, I am not, no, you took me to that place to kill me.
Oh, my
I
goodness.
am not going back. Never, ever.
My last daughter had a similar experience.
Anyway, you know, that kind of thing happened. And I told myself, I will go back. So I would go periodically, almost every 2 years, because there is there's something about Guyana for me. That's the home of, that's, as I say,
Of course, that's where
my
your
navel string is buried right there.
That's one of our statements.
Right,
one of our
right
things,
under the
yes.
calabash tree.
Yeah.
So Guyana is everything to me. And I said I would go back and see. I packed all these barrels. I took books. I said, well, I'll go to all the schools. The high schools in my area, I gave out books to all the high school kids. I spoke to them. I wanted to interact with the Linden kids. Not that I wasn't in Georgetown, but you know, Georgetown was really not my thing. It's a little too busy for me. And even when I went there, the University of Guyana was about to have their graduation. So
they were busy.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, the person who was going to give the speech is a cousin of mine, Vincent Adams. So Vincent had sent an invitation. He told me, I know you're coming in, but told his niece, his cousin, make sure you bring her, you know, she's going to come as my guest. So I did go there. And of course, the VC was telling me, okay, now that you're here, you can do something with the University of Guyana. I said, I'm going to be at Linden.
I see.
Linden is everything to me.
Yeah.
And I went to all the schools. The kids knew me. After a while, hi, miss, you know, walking on the road. That's my place. And people say, oh, you're not afraid? I said, afraid of what? You know, not only that, my family
And
is
that's where
still
you came
there.
from, yeah.
I still have brothers there. I have a sister there. I have numerous nieces who are one is a headmistress. Her husband is the headmaster. And, you know, they're all...
And they're part of the
Yeah, my sister
community.
owns a boat landing that crosses the river. So, you know, I was comfortable. Nobody would do me anything. As a matter of fact, I would walk from one end of that village all the way down to the cemetery, taking pictures and talking to people. And in this electronic age, by the time I got back to her place, she
knew where you had been.
Where I'd been,
yeah.
who I'd spoken to, everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, of course, they made me check in with two guys. The cab stand was right by my sister's boat landing. So they said, make sure you take the name of two guys and their numbers, so that wherever you are, you can call them.
I see.
Yeah, they had
Make
it
sure they
organized.
protect you. So, so they did welcome you back.
Oh, wonderful. But then things started to change.
So that's when you discovered the cracks.
That's when I discovered the cracks.
So what are the cracks? Where were the cracks?
The cracks were in culture. The cracks were even my family. They were cracks. You know, I think if I'd gone back and had my own accommodations that I'm accustomed to, it would have been a different thing. But when you go back and you say, okay, I'll stay with family and so on, after a while they get tired of you, man. Face reality, you know.
Or you get tired of being, you
know,
get tired of bunking, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
But where I stayed at first, it was only my sister, the only person. You know, she had a house, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, you know, I was fine. But even then, you know, I think people are accustomed to their own routine. They're accustomed to, and in a way, when you think of it, you know, who is it that said fish and company start to stink after how many weeks?
Too long, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. And after a while, you know, you have a feeling, well, really, I don't think I'm welcome here. And I didn't want to go and live on my own, even though I could have, because, you know, there's still issues. You've got to face issues.
Safety issues.
Safety issues.
Yeah.
If you go back, and let's say you're an older woman, especially, who knows what could happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Living alone is not a good thing.
And I suppose, as you also recalled, there was some residue, or I think residue is probably a mild word, in terms of the political fallout.
Oh, yes.
So you still have this strong political,
yes.
Those are some big cracks.
Issues. Yes, those are big cracks. Because Linden was once known for the massacre, as they call it, because they supposedly chased out the East Indians and murdered, as they said, massacred them. And, you know, Mrs. Jagan had said that Linden will pay for this because they chased out the East Indians, you know, and Chetty, her husband. They said, Linden will pay for what they did.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you look at what they call the Wisma massacre on the internet, they call it a massacre. And I mean, I defined the word massacre in this book. And I said, really, I mean, what happened was bad. I was there. I saw the ring of fire.
Right.
They even threatened me because I was nosy and on the veranda peeking to see who was throwing the bottles.
You were like me. I was always out there looking to see what was going on.
Until I heard the words, you're peeking, you're going to get what you want.
Oh.
So I went inside. But of course, I was peeking from behind the curtains.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I saw when they threw the bottles. And incidentally, the one East Indian woman who lived in our street at the time that they were burning out, my mother had gotten all her stuff from her, important papers from her. I never knew this. I found this out when I was here, that she had gotten her jewelry, she had gotten everything she had left with my mother.
Oh, for safety, yeah.
And decades later, she went to England. And decades later, she came back, like I think 20 years later, and she said, my mother had everything there waiting for her. Even though my mother, you know, was an alley cock, mixed black person.
Right.
She looked just like you. And, you know, she she knew what was right and what was wrong.
Right, right.
Well, after that so-called massacre where 10 East Indians were killed, remember that?
Yeah.
And they were driven out, the home, I think about 300 homes were burned, whatever. But then, several months later, remember what happened? The Son Chapman incident.
Yes.
Where they bombed the launch that was going from Georgetown to Linden.
Bridge, yeah.
And they killed 30-something people, pregnant woman, baby blown out, you know. I actually sent for a copy of the report from the governor. I actually have that report. And where they were talking about at the hospital, let's say they were told they would get 9 bodies, but then they got like 10 bodies and 3 half bodies. You know?
My goodness.
Yes, so from that report I actually
that was
quoted
real
all
massacre,
that. So the racial thing was there.
Yes,
Serious,
still very
you know,
strong.
rough.
Yeah. All the politics, and the politics and race are so intertwined.
Still there.
Still very
I was walking down the street, I saw Prime Minister, Prime Minister, he was walking along with a guard. And I mean, I know the guy, so I was sitting at my sister's boat landing, I learned to lime again, you know. And there he came, so I jumped out, I said, hi, Mr. Harris, how are you doing? And then we started to talk about a friend of mine and a friend of his in Canada. So we stood there, we were talking and so on. And the people were passing by, and I didn't know they were, as I say, cutting their eyes on me. When I went back and I sat, my niece at the boat landing, she said, "You're going to get us in trouble." I said, "Why?" She said, "That man is a PPP."
So
I said,
that division is still very strong.
Yeah. Yes, he's the opposition.
Opposition, so you don't talk to them.
Yeah, but the next thing is, well, I told her, of course, and I wasn't even talking politics with
Right,
him.
yeah.
But mind you, when I was talking to him, I remembered he was interjecting things like, "And you see this road? We built this road, PPP. At a
So
great
he was
price."
sending his message along.
He was still sending his message. You know, you cannot get rid of
Can't get rid of the politics.
Politics.
Yeah, politics and race in Guyana are so intertwined.
So intertwined.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So you also talked about some of the superstitions that have perpetuated some of these things.
Oh yeah.
And I wonder whether you think that because of the deep culture, the stronghold that you have of the culture in that area, whether these superstitions have become, I wouldn't say Bible, but
You mean about
mantras
each other?
yes, but mantras that they live by in terms
like
of.
in terms of maybe like East Indians are so and blacks
And
are so.
yeah, the stereotypes.
Those stereotypes still exist. I mean, as much as I was very happy to see that the races are mixing a whole lot.
A little better.
Oh,
yeah.
much better. I actually wrote about that. That when I went out, even here, if you look in the first set of pictures that I have, this is Mackenzie High School when I was presenting some books to them.
Oh yes, I remember
Yes.
seeing that. Yes.
And this picture was in the Kaichur News. And this picture, if you look at the composition, look at
That's
the ladies.
true. Yes, I
Some are
remember
East
noticing that.
Indians.
Yes.
This one looks Chinese,
Yes.
East Indians.
You have a perfect example of what Guyana is,
what
really.
Guyana
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So things are getting better. And, you know, the Chinese are in there now. And of course, that adds, well,
another
they've
dimension.
been there a while.
There, yeah.
Because I have a niece.
But in a different role.
In a different role.
Yes.
But now that they're there, you know, I walked down the pavement one day and I was going into a store to buy something. And of course I noticed all the stores were owned by the Chinese. And I'm saying, oh my God, what's going on? And when I walked in, there was a white blonde doll. It was Christmas time. And right next to it, there was a black monkey doll. I just walked out.
Wow.
I mean, my whole consciousness was fronted.
assaulted,
It was like an assault. I couldn't believe it. And the people
In
take
this day and age, at
people
this
take
day.
it. The people take it.
Yeah, they're still
That's the
accepting
problem
that.
that's
Yeah.
happening, that they are accepting that.
Hmm.
And, you know, I don't get it.
Wow.
I really
So-
don't get it.
When did you decide that I can't go back home?
Well, it's not that I can't go back.
Or
Because
at least
I was back home about six months ago.
6 months, yes.
In August, I came back.
as you stepped on these cracks,
Yes.
so to speak, what were the revelations that stayed with you? And how did you reconcile?
Well, I realized that Guyana is an emerging country, just like everybody else. I mean, we got our independence in, 1966?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't expect miracles in such
a short space of time.
I
Yeah.
understand that. Now that we're getting the oil, hopefully,
Fingers
that's a
crossed.
whole
Another
other
different
issue.
story.
But I'm hoping that they'll use some of that money to really, to do the infrastructure. I mean,
Of course, to
whole
develop the
lot
country,
about
yeah.
that. Yes, to develop the country.
Right, you did talk about
And
that.
I
yeah.
talked about that at the end, where I
Yes.
was mentioning some things that they could do.
Mhm.
Of course, to get the education system
Right.
and somebody say back where it was.
Mm.
I guess because we had the white British
Mhm.
education. And I mean,
But discipline.
Yes,
Discipline is
in
part of
Mackenzie,
education.
in a way, I hate to say we were lucky, but I guess we were, because in order for the when they built the schools, right? They built elementary school and they did a high school, but they did the high school because they had kids in Watuka. They had white kids
Of
there in
course,
that part.
yeah.
And they wanted a good education
For
for
them,
their
of
children.
course.
So when they had the high school built, ironically, they built it in the village.
Ah.
Yeah, because by then, you see, a lot of people were like staff. People had,
Oh,
black
local.
folks had, yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah.
they built it there. Of course, people had to pay to go to it. That's why I was saying I got one of
Yes,
the scholarships. So.
yeah.
But people had to pay to go to that high school. But I had a white headmaster. I had a white English teacher.
Yeah, of
You
course.
know,
We all
they
did.
brought, isn't
Yeah.
that something?
Yeah,
So
we
they
all did.
brought them because they wanted to make sure that their kids were educated.
course.
They wasn't
They weren't looking out for us. No.
For us.
They
You
weren't looking
understand?
out- yeah.
And even right now, there's a guy, Sir Dexter Hutt. You probably know of Dexter. Dexter's sister was in class with me. He was, younger. And Dexter he's now Sir Dexter. And if you look him up, you'll see he talks all about Mackenzie High and
Right.
all of the influences that Guyana had on him and all of that, So, but, it's
Well,
it
we're
is
running
what
out
it
of
is,
time, but
yeah.
I do thank you so much for talking with us and at least opening up the conversation so that
Yes.
we understand a little bit about what one finds and returning to a place that you haven't lived in for so many years.
Yep.
There are changes that we have to understand and adapt to if we want to go back there.
Yes,
So-
certainly. And I would tell anybody who wants to go back, please go and spend some time there
Yes.
before
you
you
decide. Yeah.
make your decision.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. That's wise words in which to end. I appreciate that.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thanks very much for having me.
My pleasure. And thank you for watching CaribNation. Until next time, I'm Derrice.